Welcome into another edition of Mic'd Up here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and Pittsburgh Sports Now. Mic'd Up presented by Martin Lawn Services. Contact Doug Martin and Martin Lawn Services at 412-849-5894. I'm your host, Mike Asti, and I am joined once again by Mike Vukovcan. Had a day off there. Didn't even realize, but Alan Saunders filled in. His middle name is Michael. Actually, all these years of knowing Alan, I didn't even know that. So it was still mic'd up, as Alan still brought the Michael there with his middle name. But we're back with two mics on the first name. And we have a lot to guide you into the weekend with, which will include a bowl prediction, a March Madness bowl prediction, as we're both going to give for the end of this show, our big upset for the NCAA Tournament, which has been in full swing. We've had some play-in games now occur, and today we're getting into the actual real tournament with the actual legit field here, as that's now been fully set. Before we get there, though, we're going to touch on the annoying subject for some and the popular subject for others, the subject that just seemingly never will leave my life, and that is JuJu Smith-Schuster as the Steelers' offseason continues to churn, and he continues to remain unsigned. So is there actually now a possibility the unthinkable could occur? And I feel like one of the rare subjects that all of Pittsburgh media has been aligned with for 2 years now is that JuJu would leave after last season for some way or another. Is that actually going to be wrong? And will he actually possibly be back with the Steelers based on the market right now? And then also some news and notes and some conversation about Pitt football and some notable Pitt football players that fans are familiar with, and if they actually hurt their draft stock by skipping out on either part or all of last season because of the pandemic. So, Mike, to get things underway, as I said, JuJu Smith-Schuster, it's the topic that just never ends, as he right now remains unsigned. Rumors to the New York Jets, rumors to the Miami Dolphins, rumors with the Las Vegas Raiders. The Jets in particular were kind of heating up as potentially a favorite for him as recent as yesterday. The Jets have made some signings since then. They have spent some money since then. Seems impossible to be looking at JuJu now. Other receivers have been signed, John Brown, etc., that the Steelers have either been rumored to be interested in, that have maybe wanted to come to Pittsburgh, or just in general in the market. A lot of receivers now have been signed all across the league, and JuJu remains unsigned. So
Miami yesterday. Well, Miami yesterday signed a one-year deal with Will Fuller of the Texans. They were a team that had a lot of cap space. There was some.
They've been rumors with Connor too.
Down there, they need playmakers for Tua. Right. As you mentioned, the Jets a couple days ago they signed Corey Davis of the Titans, and then yesterday they signed Keelan Cole, who was a promising receiver with the Jaguars. So they got two new guys, plus they drafted two guys. So you would think on the surface, that wouldn't be a fit. The Lions' number one receiver for the last couple of years, Kenny Golladay, he's in New York visiting with the crosstown New York Giants. And that was, some people from the NFL Network were throwing out the theory of JuJu wanted to take his brand to the number one market in the country.
Right.
If they sign Golladay, they're not going to sign JuJu. So places are starting to dwindle, and, unfortunately, nobody really knows aside from him and his agent and the teams what's going on. People that don't like Schuster are throwing up his social media antics and how serious he takes the game and how he can be a distraction. Some other people are just bringing up the fact that he might not be, despite his impressive numbers, he just might not be a great number one receiver. As we've all talked about, it's a passing league. And with the way teams throw the ball in the NFL right now, it's not hard to catch 80 pass. It's a passing league. He only averaged 8 yards per catch last year. That's pretty pedestrian.
831 yards despite 97 catches. If
you
have
exactly.
Almost 100 catches, you got to get over 900 at minimum, if not 1,000.
You've heard all the stuff about him. You've read as far as why he's not signing. If you had to lay the number one reason why, we're into Friday and he hasn't signed a deal yet, what would it be?
Obviously, it's a tough question because there's many legs that involved with JuJu here. I would say as much as people can point to the social media antics and can point to the branding, and maybe he does have a focus outside of football for New York City or certain markets, I truly believe the reason why he's not signed to this point, and no matter what he says about, oh, I just want fair value, it doesn't have to be a mega historic deal, I think him and his agent view him to be a little more than he is in terms of the perception of the National Football League. We've talked about other receivers. John Brown is that receiver that keeps coming to mind because of his production, what he signed for, the rumors with the Steelers, and being so similar to JuJu, but a lot cheaper. So I feel like that people are looking at JuJu's production, 831 yards, 97 catches, the average per catch, per target, way down. Mike, listen to this. 59 yards per game on an average for JuJu. That's barely number 2 level, let alone number 1. Yeah. So for me, he's not a number 1 receiver. For me, his number 1 receiver numbers, his rookie year and sophomore season, were with Antonio Brown there. And yes, he was crazy, but he was the best receiver in football, and he was taking the double coverage. Once AB was gone, JuJu's numbers precipitously dropped. And yes, you could point to maybe Mason and Duck 2 years ago, but Ben was there last year. And regardless, if you're a number 1 receiver getting tons of money, you have to be great no matter who the quarterback is. You need to be able to elevate guys, get separation, and help a team no matter what else is going on, make it easier on everybody else. JuJu doesn't do that. JuJu can be great when everything's going well. And yes, it's cool to see him stiff arm a defender. He has nice images and posterizing plays. But he's just not a number 1 receiver to me. So him and his agent must want money that is more than what the market for him is. He's more on the level of a number 2 receiver that's either good, maybe great, and honestly, that in addition to the market for receivers in general being dry. As I told you off the air, this is a bad offseason to be a receiver and look for a contract because the cap is horrible based on a pandemic. People are not valuing receivers that high based on what the Steelers have done recently. People are saying, I can draft a receiver on a rookie deal to produce very early in their career. It's now been happening for years. And the Steelers in particular are that team with JuJu, Claypool, James Washington, etc. That's why they don't need to bring JuJu back and give him tons of money. And that's why the Steelers shouldn't pay JuJu tons of money. So I think the market for receiver and him elevating himself and believing in himself more than what his real market value is as a number 2 and not a 1 is why he hasn't signed. I also feel, and I'll pivot back, that there maybe is a chance now that he could come back to Pittsburgh as much as I wrote him off from being a Steeler this offseason long ago, because the only thing I could think if I'm his agent now, I maybe would tell JuJu, look, if you actually really do like Pittsburgh, you do believe in that team, you're obviously going to want a bigger deal at some point, but this is a bad offseason. You're not going to get more than poor number 2 money. If you want more, maybe go back to Pittsburgh for a 1-year deal on a short-term contract and try to beef up your value again when next year the cap will be higher. And we've also learned with the Amazon Prime deal for Thursday Night Football and the 17th game, etc., there's going to be a lot more money to go around even for next season. So maybe that could be a thinking of coming back on 1 more year deal to do that. But if he doesn't, he's coming back with his tail between his legs. He didn't get the big deal somewhere. If he wants the money now for multi-years, I don't know where that's coming from. He's going to have to really humble himself. And instead of $15 million, which people may have predicted him to get a couple years ago, it might be as low as 10 a season, which is great money for you and I, but not for his value of his position and what he thinks he is. But do you think there's a chance now, or even a greater chance at least, of him returning to the Steelers, even if it's on a 1-year short-term deal to beef up his value again?
No, I just
still
don't.
No.
Okay. No, just because the Steelers, I believe, have too many other. They have too many other needs. They made a signing. They signed defensive lineman. Now they're over the cap again. They still have to fill the inside linebacker position. I would think at some point they're going to address the running back position. I just feel as though they have too many needs.
They got to pay a practice squad. They got to pay draft picks.
Yeah, I just think they have too many holes that need to be filled, and receiver isn't one of them. They have to pick, they're eventually going to sign a veteran tight end to go with Ebron. So they just have too much to be, no matter what his discount would be, it just wouldn't be money well spent for the Steelers. And from his side, I agree with you 1,000% as to why he's not signed right now. I think if this was next year, if we're in 2022,
someone would pay it.
Yeah, somebody would have paid it. Right now, there's a handful of teams that have a surplus of money to spend, especially that type of money, and they've probably already filled it. And And I also just question whether or not his ego would allow him to come back here on a one-year deal. I just
because as much as fans maybe would like it and would say, "Oh, you media were wrong all along. He wanted to come back to Pittsburgh." That wouldn't be reality. The only way he'd be coming back to Pittsburgh is if his tail is between his legs and he couldn't get a deal anywhere else. He couldn't get a long-term deal anywhere else, and he has to put his tail between his legs and humble himself and say, I'm willing to do this over again next year as a free agent, go for it one more year, and I'll take whatever. And that would be embarrassing and would be a major ego hit.
Yeah.
And honestly, with Ben now a year older, even if you think he's better than Mason or any other options, he still would be a year older. He's made mistakes last year. The offensive line is going to be worse than it was this past season, you would figure. Certainly younger, with Banner now coming in as a full year and being a starter, but he's inexperienced, didn't get to start last year after winning the job, and then whoever they would draft, Villanueva, et cetera, might be off the team. Running back positions in flux right now. Maybe they're going to look to the draft. They might look to that Memphis back, et cetera, but still, there's going to be a young position. They're going to be young everywhere. Honestly, Mike, if I'm JuJu, I would be concerned there's a risk your value could go down. Granted, there's more money around the NFL, but he could have a worse season. And if he has a worse season another year next year with the Steelers, his value might plummet to a number 3 or a lower level 2 position rather than a high level 2 position, which is what he thinks he is, maybe even above that. So it is a risk if he would do that.
I think it's interesting. A guy that I don't know that he's on JuJu. I think he has potential, but he's had injury problems. But Will Fuller, he's a guy that I mentioned signed with the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah.
He was the number 1 receiver after Hopkins was traded from Houston. Maybe he took the same route because he's hitting free agency. You figure he's still only 27 years old. That's when he wants to sign. He agreed to just a 1-year deal for $10 million. Maybe he's doing the thinking of.
Well, does that hurt JuJu though? If he's willing to do that, does that hurt JuJu's market? Because that they could say, JuJu, you're the similar player. Why would I give you 3-4 years? Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. I wonder if he's going to start setting a precedent here of these players starting to realize that the money isn't there like it will be in the future. So take a 1-year deal, play, try to fatten up your stats, and then go back to free agency next year and see what you can do. Because I think
better fatten up your stats.
Yeah. Well, the only way that I could see him coming to Steelers, and I don't know, I'm not in the know as far as what their relationship is. I don't know how well him and Ben get along. If they get along really well and they have a really tight relationship, and things don't look good for JuJu on the free agency market, maybe Ben influences and talks him into, we could have a good year. We could, whatever. I don't know, but
I would think even if
some of it might depend on how well those two get along.
And I would say, I mean, from what I know, and it's not the end all be all, they're not best friends. They're not hanging out on the weekend. They have a better relationship than Ben had with Antonio Brown, of course. They have a positive professional relationship. And I would say that I wouldn't be shocked if Ben, because he is coming back next year, he has said that he obviously wants to win next year and wants to have a better season and wants to go out on a better note next year, even though he restructured. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Ben would say, okay, the market's dry for him. I want him, just for the simple fact it would make the team better. I mean, honestly, it's not like they would – yes, JuJu's not a number 1, but I can't go as far as to say they'd be better without him unless they replace it in the draft or some other way or sign somebody, and a lot of these receivers have now been taken. there is still a positive of him on the field. If you can get away from everything else that he does also bring to the table. I don't think his off the field stuff bothers Ben anywhere near as much as it bothered him with AB. And I think the professional relationship is sound enough with Ben wanting to win enough that I wouldn't be shocked if if we go into next week, for example, mid Wednesday unmiked up and there's still no movement, that would mean that something maybe has to give, and I wouldn't then be shocked. But I think even if that occurs, that's a poor perception on JuJu because the NFL is not stupid. Everyone's not as stupid as maybe some would think. That's going to look like JuJu's coming again with his tail between his legs, and he's humbling himself. Maybe he'll do that similar deal that you mentioned for 1 year 10. I think that hurts JuJu trying to get a long-term deal. And the only comparison I can give position-wise, if you remember this, Mike, and you remember this well with a Western PA boy, what's happening to receivers right now happened with cornerbacks a few years ago, actually about 5 or 10 years ago, and Darrelle Revis kind of set that standard. Yeah. Granted, he was at a higher level. He's a Hall of Famer, of course, but he started saying, and this is when he won the championship with the Patriots and then Tampa and 1 year apiece, he basically said, no, I don't want a mega deal. The market's dry. I don't want a mega deal. I want a 1 year deal. I will prove myself, and then I'll go get another 1 year deal, and I'll do the LeBron thing where I'm going to bet on myself. And it worked out because he was a productive player. He won a Super Bowl with the Patriots. He got himself back with the Jets eventually, had that stint in Tampa. So he got his money year at a time, stayed healthy, but that's the risk. He was even older than JuJu is now. JuJu's only 24. In the NFL, it's not like Major League Baseball. If you do that and you get hurt, like Mike, if Darrelle Revis broke his leg or tore his ACL in the middle of those 1 year deals, he would be screwed. You get a signing bonus, but it's not long-term money for your life. That's what JuJu wants. That's what AB wanted. That's what Bell wanted. That's what these guys want. And the market's just dry. So I think that's more of the issue than his off-the-field antics. Maybe that's a tiebreaker for some teams not to like it. Maybe some teams would like it. I think the Raiders, for example, I'm shocked the Raiders haven't already jumped at him. They were in rumors before. They don't care about off-the-field antics. They want playmakers. But that, I think, shows you how dry the market is for receivers right now.
Yeah, it's surprising. They raised some eyebrows to some people around the league, despite having Josh Jacobs. Yeah. They signed Kenyon Drake, another guy that takes a 1 year deal for I believe it was $11 or $12 million. So
it could be smart with the money being higher next year, but you're betting on yourself. It's a risk.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Pro Day, Pitt Pro Day a couple days ago, and it was interesting. A couple guys from Pitt bet on themselves in the off season that they wanted to. It's weird how that worked out, Mike. Paris Ford and Jalen Twyman. Those guys, Jalen Twyman opted out before the season. Paris Ford midway through the season.
Right.
And I'm not going to criticize any of those guys personally because I don't know their situation. Injuries happen, things happen. COVID might have played a role in what they decided.
Yeah,
but those guys decided to sit out, and it's kind of interesting. Jalen Twyman, he raised some. Got a lot of people excited by the 225 bench press. He did it 40 times. Which was unheard. That was like
that guy went viral. Yes.
Yeah. However, his 40 wasn't good, and I don't know how much stock I put into a 40 for a defensive lineman. Some people say he hurt his draft, but one guy that there's no doubt hurt his draft stock, and he got ripped pretty good by an NFL.com, Larry Zerline. He's a draft analyst for NFL.com.
Okay.
Has a national radio show. What do you take of this review of Paris Ford? It's pretty scathing.
Scathing is the word I was going to use too, yes.
Yeah, I just saw the number for Paris's Ford Pro Day, and I'm trying to figure out what he trained for after opting out. I heard from a scout that he was doing the 360s at the touchline on the short shuttle. No way that he could have had a trainer. He ran a 4.940 as a safety. He's not draftable. Ouch.
Yeah, ouch. Again, I will echo the sentiments that it's very, very difficult to take a position to criticize a kid in the beginning of a global pandemic that nobody had ever dealt with before if they would choose to opt out, because we just didn't know then. And honestly, they may also have been betting on themselves and maybe betting against the team. Maybe they looked at it. Some of those, Pitt didn't have that great of a year last year. Maybe they looked at it and said, this is a global pandemic. Am I going to want to kill myself, risk getting COVID, risk my family, etc., if I don't really have a chance at prime time, at national championship? We didn't even at that point know there were going to be bowl games, there was going to be a playoff. A lot of uncertainty when some of these decisions were made. And certainly with Parrott Ford's case, once the season's kind of going down the drain, and yes, it started out hot for Pitt, starting out with that 4-0 start, but once it pivoted away, then what's your motivation? It's similar to, for many years, star athletes, if the team's season goes down the drain and then they're in a bowl game, but it's a minor bowl game, they don't want to play in that bowl game. They would rather prepare for the NFL draft, but just an elongated version of that. So I'm not going to criticize the decision either, but the caveat is, and this is the same thing that could be a caveat with a professional athlete that they want to take a break because of COVID. You need to train. You need to be in shape. Now, I get it, and this is the reason why maybe you don't do it if your future is on the line despite a pandemic and the understanding of that. Nothing can mirror playing. Nothing. There is no training in the world, no trainer in the world that can mirror you dealing with in-game action, especially when you're looking to be a draft prospect. So we even heard it from draft analysts back then. There were anonymous reports from GMs and different people inside the NFL back then. Some got criticized at that point, saying they were too hard on the kids and it was too much of a political stance. But they were saying, these kids that opt out, if they don't want to play that year in college, it's going to hurt their draft stock. I might not want to draft them. It's going to hurt my perception of them either as a team guy or just a physicality and if they're ready. So it now appears that, they took that break, and now it appears that either they're ready for certain things, like you mentioned, somebody being able to bench press all those weights. Maybe they're doing something just on their upper body and not fully training as a player, because, as you know, every different position requires a different skill set. Not every position do you want to be just a rock of your upper body. You need to be able to run. You need to be able to have agility. You need to be able to get out of separation, beat out defenders, beat out offenders. You need to be able to do a lot of different things. And again, you can't mirror that unless you're in game action. So maybe they trained at the wrong thing. Maybe they didn't train at all. Maybe they had too much fun. We don't know. But I don't know if somebody's undraftable necessarily. That's obviously very, very scathing remarks there. But I think the draft stock's definitely going to be hurt by this. And I think there's definitely going to be some regret there. So I don't know in terms of if that's fair or unfair, but I guess that's not even a conversation that matters. We're not drafting anybody. That's just going to be the case. That's just a reality. And that was a risk that they had to be aware of. They had to be aware of it at that point when they made those decisions. If they weren't aware, they didn't have enough people inside their camp influencing them properly, or they did not make an intelligent, mature decision, it's definitely going to influence things. And I wouldn't be shocked if it influences more teams and more players around the country. That's just going to be a thing. So that's just a can of worms added to this draft. I think certainly an unsigned free agent could be a possibility. You definitely could get signed if not drafted, but that definitely takes you down a ticker in terms of money, to say the least there. So
yeah, Jalen Twyman, I don't know. He wasn't even before. I think people know. I think people know what they're getting with him. I really do. I think he showed enough his first couple of years that he's going to be a beast in the middle. And I don't care what he ran in the 40 at the other day.
4.9 is bad though.
But no. That was
Paris.
Okay.
That
was Paris's Ford, who's supposed to be a safety.
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. 4.9. Oh, 4.9 is bad for that
Ford's
position for sure.
Ford's a different case, because I remember the funny thing is, as the mock drafts were going throughout the season, even some 7-round mock drafts by some of those NFL people, he wasn't appearing until even before this pro day, he wasn't appearing until the 4th or 5th round then.
Yeah.
Now with this, he was supposed to. The thought was that with all this training he was doing down in Miami, that the
what a city to train in while you're off.
Yeah.
There's some fun to be had there too.
Yeah, the pro day was going to be his chance to shine, as far as that's where he would excel as far as showing his athleticism.
Right.
And unfortunately for him, the last perception people are going to have of him now in the NFL is what they saw, fair or unfair. We will see.
Right.
He's a guy that can play in the league. I don't know what happened to him at that day, but unfortunately for him,
it's a shame because I think last year could have been a big year for him.
If he gets drafted, it's not going to be where he expected to be drafted when he opted out of Pitt. I can tell you that.
No, of course not. And he made the decision, so he made his bed, he has to lie in it, even though it's unfair because of a pandemic. I do think if he would have had that season last year, could have stepped it up, that really could have helped him. Because I actually remember when you were polling media prior to last season, before we knew about the pandemic, on who would be an unsung hero player, many thought Paris Ford could be that guy for Pitt last season, and then we didn't actually get to see that come to fruition because him eventually leaving the program with the pandemic and able to take advantage of that rule that now has seemingly burned him. Mic'd up here, Pittsburgh Sports Live's morning show here on PSL and PSN. Martin Lawn Services is our sponsor. As we now round things out, as we have our bowl predictions here with the NCAA Tournament now coming up. And our bowl predictions are not going to be about next week or beyond. It's going to be about this coming weekend right here. This first round of the NCAA Tournament, March Madness now in full swing. The play-in games have taken place. We have the real tournament about to take place today. All throughout the day, as I also can promote I will have a post-game show after WVU's first round game against Morehead State for WV Sports now. And yes, we're going to probably go on at 1 a.m, not my fault. 9:50 p.m. tip is when that game tips off. I didn't make the schedule. I'm sure Huggins loves it because he complained about the 9 p.m. games all year and they stuff him with a 9:50er. But you got any major upsets there? We did our bracket. We did our Final Fours the other day to open up this week, and we're going to have those released for everybody, I'm sure, on Twitter and in your bracket challenge. But just out of any major upsets for this weekend, do you have any bold prediction major upsets coming up?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the couple that I had. There were a couple really good. It was good. Despite not being in Dayton, I like the games in Dayton, the feel of the first four. Right. 2 games last night were really good. The Wichita State-Drake game. But it should be fun. 3 games that I have sort of big upsets, I guess. I have Ohio beating 13, beating number 4 Virginia. I think that would qualify.
That would qualify, yes.
Yeah. Another one I have is 12 Winthrop over Villanova.
Okay.
And the last one is it's not a big one. They're a higher seed, but I feel better about my prediction now that Georgia Tech's best players out of the game with COVID. Loyola Chicago over Georgia Tech. So those are my 3, I guess, biggest first round games. But the first 2 are the big ones: Winthrop and who was the first one?
Ohio.
Virginia. Ohio. Winthrop and Ohio.
Ohio over Virginia, absolutely, with Virginia being a recent champion, would be a big deal for sure, and Ohio getting in the tournament and that being a big deal just in general for that fan base. To get a major staple win like that would almost be like Robert Morris beating Kentucky years ago, but this would be in the NCAA tournament, not then in the NIT. So that would be a win they would brag about, I'm sure, for many, many years.
What about you, Mike?
I agree with the Loyola Chicago. I honestly do agree with that one. I actually had that even before the news there with Georgia Tech's player. I would think one of them I got, and it's not as big as Ohio, Virginia. I got Utah State over Texas Tech. That's one I do have right now. That's an 11. That's an 11-6. And then, I mean, beyond that, like Virginia Tech over Florida, I could see that's a 10-7. But that's certainly possible. Florida's been an up and down team. I felt like they kind of been overrated at different points this year, watching them closely against the Mountaineers in particular. So, I mean, those 2 I could throw out there. I don't have the Ohio-Virginia one. I can't pull the trigger there. I also don't have Villanova losing, although I could see where you're going with that. There are a lot of these teams are dealing with injuries. Michigan, another team dealing with injuries, despite being a 1 seed. You figure they at least get through that first game. But I don't have anything else that's too major or crazy. Have some upsets later down the stretch. But I think Texas Tech, they've been a team that every single win they've had that's been big this year has been down the stretch, the last few seconds of a game. They've lost some of the last few seconds of a game. They could win it, but they haven't ever impressed me in dominating games. They've been very close almost all the time, and Utah State just can score. So I feel like that could potentially be one of them. And then Virginia Tech kind of showing it for the ACC over the SEC potentially there with that win. So I'm going to go with those two right now. But yeah, that'll do it for this Friday edition of our morning show. Make sure to hit us up here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Subscribe to the channel, get a notification when all these shows premiere or anything else gets uploaded on the channel, which includes a lot of pro day coverage across our myriad of sites, Pittsburgh Sports Now and even WV Sports Now and Steelers Now, getting some of those videos. Hit us up on Steelers Now, of course, in particular with all this NFL news. JuJu could sign any moment. You never know what's going to go on with the Steelers and what their next moves are going to be. And then, of course, over there, the recruiting stretch at PSN. So that'll do it. A madness-filled weekend coming up, and then we'll be with you to recap it all next week on the Monday edition of the show. For Mike Vukovcan, for all of us at Pittsburgh Sports Live and Pittsburgh Sports Now, I'm Mike Asti. This has been another edition of Mic'd Up here, presented by Martin Lawn Services. Have a great rest of your day. Yep, there's the sign behind them. Call them 412-849-5894 and enjoy the madness.